Chapter 4. The Sea of Lek. On the horizon, the sinister smudge appeared to get larger. Whatever this nautical mystery was, it was clearly mobile. He felt as though the air was getting tighter around his neck, almost as though the air had grown thicker. He began to gasp his next breaths. Gripped by panic, he almost forgot the flaming hordes that crackled and hissed in the morning mist. The burning masses that stood on the shore started shuffling their feet in what looked like anticipation. They began to kick up the sand into the morning air, causing an orange haze to capture the sunrise. The dawn, now a fiery blaze, mimicked the gathered army on the blackening sand. The once clear air smelled of burning flesh. The approaching object on the horizon started to push waves that lapped the feet of the fiery souls, causing a violent hissing sound. The sound of moans increased along with a jostling for position amongst them. Although it doused some of the flames, it caused no relief to the burning figures. Their tortured screams pierced Jilu's head like an ice pick. From atop the hill and sheltered behind a fallen tree, he watched from a safe distance. His eyes not watching the infernal rabble anymore. Instead, they were fixed on what was slowly coming into focus with the new day's light. An island, a black, grimacing outcrop of threat and mystery, started to reveal itself to the beach. Another unanimous roar came from the burning spectators. Jilu shuddered and jumped. He hid behind the thick trunk of the tree. He had to know more, though. He braved the image once more. The waves that once lapped the shore now crested and peaked into a surge that forced its way up the beach. The smouldering feet it caught with its flash of intense cold started to dim and smoke. Yet louder hisses and a crescendo of screams of pain followed. Vast plumes of black vapour came spewing forth from the island, tendrils of ominous smoke probing and tasting the air. They made landfall, stalking the beach in search of prey. Growing intensely dark, they let no morning sunlight through them until the island resembled a giant aquatic spider. The smoky plumes whipped and cracked on the water's surface. Jilu was a simple man, not made for these sort of nightmares. It had been several days since he left Panna, and he had rarely had a dry inside leg since. The island eventually stopped moving in the water, as though it had dropped an invisible anchor. It stood moored approximately 100 yards offshore. The burning army fell completely silent. A single fire spluttered into view on the only peak in the centre of the small landmass. It seemed bereft of trees or vegetation. Facing the shore was a grey and bleak beach of scree that had run off the small rocky hill. The black vapour seemed to emanate from pits that ringed the island on all shores as far as Jilu could see. Counting quickly, Jilu saw at least 20 of these shafts on this side that faced the beach, although it was clear that the smoke came from all over the circumference of the island. The surrounding water seemed to be repelled by this landmass, almost as though it was disgusted by its presence. Strange tides flowed away from its shores, leaving it bone dry. In the suddenly dry sand, fish bucked and flayed in the air, then quickly perished. A litter of dead aquatic creatures surrounded the malevolent island. A sudden huffing and shuffling noise came from the beach. To Jilu's surprise, the gathered torches began to walk into the sea. Like they'd been summoned by some unseen master. They blindly started their march. They entered the water and started to self-extinguish. A mass of steam rose into the sky, blocking out the early dawn light. An acrid smell lingered over the beach that made Jilu gag. He choked on his own vomit as he didn't want anyone to hear him, but he couldn't hold on any longer. He buried his head in a clump of long grass to stifle the sounds of constant heaving. Looking up with a pale and bewildered expression, he watched for hours as the countless flaming pilgrims entered the water. The crowd gradually got smaller, leaving only frazzled sand in their wake. Jilu saw his chance to get a little closer to this dismal spectacle. He stood on the edge of the beach as the last 100 or so willingly submerged themselves. The black sand had a crust of glass atop its once pristine white fine granules. The intense heat still emanated from the beach. An intense haze rippled through the air, along with a stinging fume that seemed to pierce the skin on contact. He watched the last head disappear under the water, about 40 feet from the shoreline, where the shallows met the deep water on his coastline. A pitiful wisp of smoke and steam leapt from the water's surface. He watched it rise until it dissolved into the now afternoon glow of the returning sunlight. The smoking tendrils that once stroked the land, probing for fresh meat, disappeared silently, falling into the sea, leaving a slick of fetid black sludge on the calm surface. Small ripples started coming from the island towards the shore. Vibrations in the sand quickly became violent tremors. The beach began to subside and be drawn into the water. Gilu took this as a good sign to escape to a safe distance. Taking up a position on higher ground, he watched the island slowly retreat from the shore. Now sitting in both fear and puzzlement at what he had witnessed in the last few days, he felt the need to watch the island leave completely. He made the judgment that as long as the island was heading away from him, it must be a good thing. As the sun hung heavy in the sky and the day turned to yet another dusk in the wilderness, Gilu kept his vigil, looking out to the horizon as the once imposing landmass became a welcome speck on the edge of view. As it dropped from the skyline, his body gave way. It had been days since he last saw the inside of his eyelids. Not since Panna had he enjoyed any respite from this unwanted venture. Sleep took him and he lay flat on the sand as the clearing waters lapped at his feet. His dreams phased in and out of focus in his troubled mind, from light to shade, from peace to fear at each breath. But apart from his uneasy slumber, he lay dormant on the beach until night fell. The sharp bite in the air that swept across the open water stole all the warmth from the day's sun away. Gilu awoke with a start, not knowing what time it was or if he was in danger. He rose to a freshly lit campfire and a roasted leg of sweet-smelling meat cooking over the flames. Above the fire, a small pot of broth bubbled away invitingly, and a tent was erected opposite him with a jug of wine that lay open and inviting outside. Was he dreaming? Or had someone come to his aid? No, fuck that, he whispered. He was convinced that everyone in the outside world was out to get him. He had hardly even drank water over the last days. His stomach was empty and rumbled in agony, yet he still remembered Sand's look of terror after he ate the fruit near the battlefields. Then his pains abated just enough for him to forget his hunger. You must be hungry, lad. Your stomach rumbling will keep me awake all fucking night if you don't fill it. Her disembodied voice spoke softly from inside the tent. Gilu sat silently and refused to answer, as he was terrified and honestly not interested in meeting anyone else. You awake, lad? Asked the voice again. Once again, Gilu refused to answer anything. The tent rustled and out stepped a tall man with long dark hair. He was the biggest human he ever saw, clothed nearly entirely in black. He wore a very scuffed leather armour. Slash marks and stitched up tears across it were worn like badges of honour. A man clearly adapted to not only the wilderness, but also to the sword and combat. Standing over Gilu, who once again feared for his life, he asked gruffly, "So are you hungry or not?" Only this time in a more impatient tone. Gilu summoned up the courage to speak. "Okay, I'm fucking hungry, alright? I'm bloody starving if I'm honest. But mister, who the fuck are you? I have no idea where I am, no idea what day it even is, and now I'm sitting at the feet of a warrior in armour who wants to share his food with me. I am sick to fucking death of pissing myself, so who the fuck are you? I don't need any more riddles. Just Answers. The stranger replied, You, lad, are on the shores of Lek, at the estuary of the river Santic, in the once holy borders of the territory of Sepa. It is the earliest dark hours of Saturday morning, and my full name is Kynoch, trusted sentinel, guardian of the temple of the night sky, the fighting order of the moon, or if you prefer, you can simply call me Kai. He cracked a slight grin. So are you fucking hungry or not, lad? He offered Jilu the repast again, and he tentatively took a bowl of broth. Drinking it like water, he gorged and sat feeling his stomach fill up with the feeling of peace at last. After he saw Jilu relax a little more, he offered him a cut of meat with a cup of wine. Kai pondered on his strange character being this far away from any settlement. After a few minutes of silence, Kai asked, So, lad, what the fuck are you doing out here in the wild? Don't you know what goes on out here in Sepa? This is no place for those ignorant of the Khan, lad. Jilu took a gulp of wine, almost downing the entire cup, and proceeded to slowly explain his predicament. About his banishment from Old Panna in supposed disgrace, about being saved by San in the battlefields, the ghosts, his new companions suddenly dying in such a horrific manner. He took a breath, then slugged from the wine jar itself. Kai lit a pipe and shared it with Jilu. Well, shit, said Kai. You've some spirit in you, lad. But before he could continue with his compliment, Jilu, now more lubricated by the wine, continued with his tale. He spoke of his search for Fan and finding the burning remains of his tent, the letter Q, and his journey down the river which he now knew was called the Santic. Stop! Wait a second, said Kai. What Q? Where? How long ago was this? Jilu replied, Only 2 dawns ago. I've seen the letter in 7 places. Where though? Replied Kai. Well, once branded on someone's head, on some grass by the riverbank near the old battlefields burnt into the ground, twice on marker stones on the paths by the Santic, once on the gate of the city of Sepa. Stop! Kai interjected. You were in the city of Sepa and made it out alive. I must know what happened. Tell me every detail. I insist. Jilu told Kai about finding his way into the city via a hidden stairway in the walls. He explained about getting instantly lost in the labyrinth that is Sepa. He then mentioned his nearly day-long pursuit of the burning human torches. Fuck! I'm too late, Kai exclaimed loudly. This is why you're on this beach, isn't it? You followed them here. Jilu looked puzzled and replied, Yes, there were thousands of flaming, walking corpses. Right here, on this beach, less than half a day ago. How did you know? They walked into the sea. Here, towards an island. Faye? Are you fucking telling me that you, a fucking expelled farmer, laid eyes on the island of Faye? Kai shouted. He sounded almost insulted by this statement. Well, yes, I saw an island move from the horizon to the shore. Is that Faye? Jilu replied, backing away slightly. Kai took a deep breath and looked like he wanted to strike Jilu for his ignorance, but remembered that he had not experienced the world as he had and tried to compose himself before answering. Yes, laddie, Kai started after exhaling with a bleak sigh. The island of Faye most believed to be a legend on these waters. What you think is the sea out there is actually an enormous lake, a lake that all territories of this land share as a common border. At its widest, the lake can be over 1,000 miles wide and 100 fathoms deep. Kai now took a huge swig of wine, and his hands were starting to shake a little. What you saw there, son, was an island of pure death. An island that constantly migrates across the Lek in search of fresh recruits, fresh souls, fresh death. Then it disappears. I believe actually from this realm. Most that know of the island stay away from the shore when they spy it on the horizon. It could be a century between sightings of Fae, but all once knew of its curse. On the land, on the crops, on the people. It is a cursed tool of the Khan. Jilu needed to know more. Who are the Khan? Shush, boy, said Kai. No one who has been blessed with your ignorance needs to sully their hearts with that knowledge. Knowing that Kai was clearly a man who had collected knowledge from the wildest regions beyond Jilu's tiny world, he decided to hold on to his questions that might cross any boundary. Kai apologized for his secrecy and explained, I was once part of an order, commonly known as the Order of the Moon. We protected those who were threatened by the dead or possessed by evil spirits. For hundreds of years my order vowed to fight the fabled mysteries of the dead. This world was a much more forgiving place when the old superstitions and beliefs were widely practiced. He took out an amulet from behind his leather breastplate. On one side it pictured a full moon and a knife. On the other side it simply had a painting of a flame. This was our choice when we took our vow, to fight by the moonlight or burn. Those thousands of torched souls you saw chose to burn, cowards, vile traitors selected by the Khan to strengthen their dark magic and influence. He put the amulet back behind his armour and sighed. His eyes welled with tears. He continued, Once we were a real force in the world. Everyone sought our counsel. We journeyed and were welcomed into nearly all the territories, travelling in small troops, carrying out exorcisms, funerals, also sometimes passing judgment where atrocities had taken place. We were not exactly feared, but respected as a necessary force. To the south, there is a huge city, the city of Well. They were our biggest and strongest allies to our cause. That was until the Khan reared its twisted head in this world. They poisoned the minds of nearly everyone, from landowners to slaves who ploughed the fields. Kai finished his wine and quickly poured another. Where are your order now? Jilu asked, nervously. I am the only one who escaped and still practices. The order was dissolved by the powers infected by the Khan. We were labelled as traitors by power-hungry nobles and wealthy landowners. All across the lands, from each shore of the Lek, we were simply hunted, and countless warriors were torn to pieces without trial. All at the surreptitious behest of the Khan. I am the only one brave enough, or perhaps stubborn enough, to still carry out my sworn duties. To protect the innocent, to find answers to the spells of the Khan, and to fight to the death in defence of the souls who still trust me. Alas, few know about my cause these days, and the Khan's power gets stronger with each treacherous soul it ensnares on the island of Fae.